Okay, we are back and we are really excited. As with all of our conversations so far, we're really excited today to be chatting with Hannah Smith, LCPC, who is another one of our wonderful therapists here at Be Well. Hannah, welcome and good morning. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. Good morning to you guys. Thank you for taking the time. I'm so excited to get into it with y'all.
Of course. And I completely didn't mean to skip over the wonderful, the brilliant co-host we have here. Jake, would you like to say hi?
Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning, Jake. Good morning.
I love, we're already capturing the fun, the playful energy. Before we started recording, we're saying in full transparency, we're like three theater kids in a Zoom room here. And I think I'm just excited to see where that takes us today. Hannah, let's get started. Tell us a little bit about your client Venn diagram.
Yes. So what I notice is in my work, the two different ends of it, noticing, of course, like more clients coming in with more acute, maybe life transitions, things that maybe they're anticipating, expecting, or they're right in it and feeling away. And then, of course, the other end of the spectrum, maybe something a little bit more externally. Things feel the same on the outside, but maybe the gears are grinding inside, and that might be a little bit more long term. So two very different ends of the spectrum, but in the middle, I noticed, as obvious as it sounds, that stuckness that I think resonates for so many of us. So that stuckness is really kind of like I always think of like a finger trap, right? And no matter what end of the spectrum you're on, there's things that are pulling on us, whether that's external or internal. And the more you pull, the more stuck you are, right? So
Mm.
I say that all the time to every single client ever. So that's like my favorite way of thinking about it, very visual. Um,
Yeah.
so no matter what the noise is, as dynamic or different as it is, that tends to show up. And what I do with my clients in that stuckness, in that work, is to notice the relationship with it, and the distress tolerance of that stuckness, and noticing, okay, how are we
Mm.
doing with that? Change will come, right? Jake and I always say Jake is like my total fangirl for this, where change is going to happen no matter what, right? It's everything designed in us and around us is going to happen. How can we find intentional choice in that change? And kind of better ourselves in that, and notice our emotions in that stuckness and how it's putting a filter on the information that we're receiving during that time, and what we want to do with that, how we want to respond to those filters and interactions.
Let me fangirl for a second. Sorry,
Yeah.
I need to, which is the reason I love that so much is because I see so many people coming in saying, I need to make a change. I want to make a change. There's going to be a change. And they feel so much responsibility for that. Like, I need to make things change. And what you blow my mind with every time that you say that is sort of the change doesn't care whether or not you
Mm.
participate in it, it's going to happen. And how do you find those places of intervention instead of feeling this responsibility for everything, which feels so what's the right word for this? Like, I feel so unburdened every time you say that, like, oh, right, I don't have to do everything. I
Mm-hmm.
can find the places where there's going to be a lot more efficiency kind of in if I put my energy here or here or here instead of taking responsibility for the whole process.
Mm.
There was this is somewhat tangential, but I'm just going to throw it in there. There was, I think it was on Oprah in like the 90s, there was some episode, and they were talking about change, and specifically in grief, but exactly what you're saying, Jake. There was this phrase that got thrown out there. I can't remember who said it, but they're saying like, you can do all the backflips and twist yourself into knots all you want and try and push things down or get really active about it. But they said grief or change, whatever it is you're going through, kind of just goes like this and it just sits back and it just waits until you're done. And then it'll happen. I'm like, oh, yes, that is, it kind of releases that pressure valve. And that authoritarian voice that we can often come in with, which is understandable.
Yeah.
Totally, especially if you are like a resourceful, creative, intelligent person who has been taught that these skills and strengths help you impact your world and help you move towards what you want and help you. And then it's what I hear in what you're saying is something like grief or the changes that are out of our hands are like someone coming up to us and being like, yeah, but not here. Like those skills don't apply in the same way here. And it's like, what? It's a really like, yeah, that intentional leaning back. Yeah. Mm.
Mm.
Hannah, I want to get a little bit more specific about, I'm picturing your Venn diagram, I'm picturing these ends of the spectrum. What's happening in people's lives that are bringing them in to see you?
Yeah, I am noticing this place of that I keep coming back around to is connectivity, particularly, coming from pandemic and what's happening there. Communication skills, mood, processing all of that. And again, landing in that stuckness of like, what is happening? Where am I? How am I responding to this? They're noticing something different, and maybe whether it's a lacking connectivity or just maybe a shift in it and how to adjust to that. And I pull in mood again and how that affects us so much when we're designed for connectivity, looking for places of connectivity, but also having to kind of in conjunction work with our mood that might not match up with our need for connectivity at that same time. So how we talk to those two different parts, how they talk to each other, how we talk to them, that's definitely a spot. Connectivity feels like this really big theme that most, if not all, I'm going to say all my clients kind of come back around to in some way. Yeah.
I'm holding that like in the context of what our world has gone through since 2020. What connectivity means right now, what connection means right now, all the things that have interrupted that connection with each other, and how that then how that happens internally.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Cool.
Right.
So some of us turned off the reaction, some of us didn't. And just, you say it so eloquently, you kind of fit that into a minute and a half or less, and that just seems like it could fill months and months and years of sessions. And something that feels like we all need to be aware of as therapists. This is kind of a big question. Casual for a Wednesday morning, but can you tell us about your why in this work? What is your why, Hannah?
Yes. This work allows me to get more and more comfortable with an experience that I think we all definitely are designed to be at least a little uncomfortable with. And I think that experience is uncertainty. So when I can sit with someone and lean towards something that's difficult, hard, and we sit next to each other and do that in that process, like that feeds and nurtures my relationship with uncertainty. And of course, I get to witness this incredible thing with my clients where they get to nurture their own. And it just feels like such a privilege. Uncertainty, of course, I always think is such a human hardwired thing to be fearful of. But it's like I get to watch in real time people take a really human fear and empower themselves and turn it into like a skill. And
Mm.
it's like, oh my gosh, you morphed and shapeshifted this thing, and now you're going to continue to do that. And then maybe get a little bit scared again, and then do that again in a different, cool, exciting, maybe messy way, as they move forward. So it just feels like the greatest privilege.
Hmm. I didn't
So-
have on my bingo card. Uh, you know, I love uncertainty.
Mm.
Like you said, it's so. If we walked down the street and asked 100 people, how do you feel about uncertainty? Ooh, don't like that. But that there's something about this work that feels so, for you at least, it feels like it draws you in, it gets you curious and your wheels turning. And then, any therapist that says that this work doesn't affect their own relationship to these concepts is lying to you. And I love the way that you've pulled that together of how just witnessing and being a part of that with people nurtures that in you.
Mm.
Hmm. Can we get a window into, like, if I'm standing outside the really big windows that are beside behind the couch in the office that you're in here, if I was like peeking in, which there's curtains now because we rectified that issue, what would we see? What does a session look like with you?
Yeah, yeah. I always think of that when I look at them, because I face the windows and I'm like, who's out there? Is anyone going to creep in? But it's actually been pretty good. So first and foremost, I like to just recap a little and pull back where we left off, right? Kind of standard. However, I do cut through that, right? It's like, okay, we were last talking about X, Y, and Z. If we have a plan to keep going there, great, love that. But I'm going to cut through that and say, but what would really actually be helpful today? Kind of addressing like, it's been X amount of time since we've seen each other. Interruptions happen, things happen. So we can just put all of that somewhere else if we need to, or glide right into it. So, and then from there, it's so dependent, right? So wherever which way we go, it's gonna, of course, depend on what the client needs that day. And myself, I'm very person-centered in that way. 100%, I trust the client that this is what they need to be talking about. And it's like, well, I think of sometimes when it's like, well, did you think about this? And like kind of trying to like force something else into the room and pull it in. I don't love that. So it's very, very guided by the client. Definitely can expect some jokes, a lot of humor. We laugh. And visuals, I always say, like, bear with me. My clients laugh at me sometimes because I'm like, we're going to take a quick trip inside my brain and we're going to imagine this looking this way. And we talk about like a bubble, right? Or a boardroom meeting of all of our different parts talking to each other, right? Different visuals that can kind of create access points to these internal selves. So those are the moments where I'm like, okay, here's where we're going. If we can try and harness this, maybe it could look like X. So definitely that. And I always bookend the ends of my sessions with, if there's anything that we missed, tell me in a couple words. Let's write it down. We can go there next time. Or maybe we didn't. And that's good too.
Ending with a little yogi recess.
Yes, exactly. Or sometimes I'll just be like, okay, do we want to yell anything at the sky? Do we have any book recommendations? Were there
Huh.
movies that you saw that you were just like, oh, and by the way, this was so great. Okay, bye. making space for that too. Just the blah, right? Sometimes that we can kind of use as a punctuation for the end of our meetings.
Hmm.
An intentional closing in some way. I think that's really valuable what you're talking about. And I really am thinking of this as like, ooh, I'm feeling myself in this session that both cutting through to what's present today for the client. What feels valuable is that how that is different than forcing in anything, that isn't that isn't like, I'm going to cut through and we're going to dive in to the deepest trauma or the thing I see as the issue or the most painful point. But that there's a cutting through, it sounds like, yeah, to the present, and then there's this intentional closing that isn't about like, we start with small talk, we end with small talk, but really is about how do we close this time together? How do we close, if this is a connection point, how do we want to mark that? Client, how do you want to mark that? And that you, Hannah, it sounds like you are very present, but that doesn't mean that's not the same as like agenda driven, or that isn't the same as like you lead, client follows. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
none of
knowing
which is surprising if people know you.
that's a fair point.
Yeah.
Knowing too that like clients do so much work in the space that we share with them and in the closing time that we have together. Sometimes that can feel a little bit abrupt, but creating that relationship and witnessing and allowing space for that relationship of like, okay, now knowing that you are going to walk out of that door and enter the world, right? What feels relevant or resonant to say here right now, knowing that now that's going to happen. Just something to like nurture the relationship with that present and responding to needs. Again, that kind of needs to come from, at least I subscribe, it needs to come from the client. And I just ask questions and make observations around those needs so that they can respond to those.
Yeah. One of the things I see a lot when people are looking for referrals or I'm looking for a therapist that does such and such is I'll see this line a lot. I want somebody that'll call me on my shit. Right? And I think there's one way of viewing that that's a little bit blunt, where it's somebody that is kind of directive and that is, and there's a lot of utility in this, I think. What I'm hearing from you is it's sort of like a side door into that, where it's not, I'm going to tell you how it is. It's, I'm going to trust you to show up with what you need to show up with today. And there might be some spaces where I notice in me like, there's something here. There's something to push in on. You're telling me you're not ready for it. And that's feels like a much more nuanced way of I'm still holding that this is what's going on or that this is what I think might be going on, but I'm not beating you over the head with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a delicate balance, right? A very, very fine line. And I think that humor is really functional in that too, right? When we can laugh together, we're joining. I come back around to connectivity, right? We're joining, we're agreeing on something together. And sometimes that's a painful point. And we can laugh about that, or a system that a client might be engaging in that's like not super intentional or consensual. And it's like, oh, haha, I did that thing again. And it's like, ha ha ha. And we laugh because you're naming, right? And it's this access point to kind of holding that feet to the feet to the fire in a way. And a point that it makes me think of from your question before of like why people come into, I was talking with two of my clients recently about this, of first taking the pressure valve and releasing it in the space a little bit, to know that we don't have to show up with that authoritarian voice. I wonder why it is showing up, but releasing that pressure valve and then holding feet to the fire, the more like direct way that I go about that is more techniques of what you take out of session and how a client might surprise themselves, and what they take away from it. Whether it's like meditation, they're like, I actually tried the meditation and it was actually pretty nice, and things like that. So holding feet to the fire in that way, where it's like, oh, you surprised yourself and this is different and you're engaging in that. What do you think that means? What could that be? So it's exactly what you're saying. It's not necessarily like, flogging of the systems and behaviors. It's
Yeah.
back and change how you're changing. How do you want to engage with that?
I'm getting this picture of like, instead of somebody saying, I'm deathfully afraid of swimming, and you saying, well, I'm throwing you in the pool.
Yeah.
You're like jumping down, sitting on the side of the pool with your feet in the water, like, come here. Jump in, but like, come here.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
I'm completely surprised at this point between the three of us that we aren't still on the first question on our 17th metaphor or image. I was gonna say, I love this. We all like have part of our native language is metaphor. And that's, Hannah, we've gone a little bit towards like what the session looks like, that being client-led, what's bringing clients in to see you, what you're learning and what you're noticing. To look through the other window, to look through the other lens, what is it that's bringing you into work every day at this point?
Even on days where I think like, I'm a person and I have distractions in my own life that can feel like they're kind of, here comes the metaphor, leaning over toward the wheel, right? And trying to drive the car of my life. There's something that I found every time I drop into sessions, and I know, Katie, we've talked about this before, where I don't know if I've found something else in my life that's as orienting as having sessions with clients, even on days that are distracting and loud and noisy. And I go back to the idea of like witnessing again and how incredible the work is that the clients are doing, and kind of wanting that to be a little bit contagious, right? Sometimes our clients are showing up in such wonderful and most of the time, like really just honest ways with themselves. And me coming into work today, it's almost like reaching out and touching them. It's like, oh yes, it does feel contagious at a certain point. And even on those days, it's like, how could I not want to come into work, right? When they are showing up in such an incredible way, despite the noise, despite all the things, and saying, no, I'm here to do something better for myself. And that's enough kind of sparkly, glittery inspiration for me to want to witness that. I don't want to miss it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we have our new Be Well Counseling, contagious in a good way.
A contagion. No.
Yeah. That's it though. That's it. You really captured what that feeling is.
I guess I'll launch into our last question, which is, what are the challenges that you have or are facing as a therapist?
The biggest thing that I think I run into over and over and over again is when a client comes in and does so much incredible work for themselves, and then they have to walk out the door and engage with systems that are intentionally designed to undermine so much of the work that we do in our time together. Loving these head shakes.
Yeah.
And I want to scream at the sky a lot of the time. And you can bet you can bet that next week clients come right in, right? I don't have to tell y'all. They come right in and they say, no, I didn't get to complete this goal because this bullshit got in the way and this is what happened. And it's infuriating sometimes.
Yeah.
We're just one person, right? We can't wave a magic wand or have crystal balls about these systems and how they're going to affect and inform our experiences, but we know that they are. So despite that, my clients and I have a lot of conversations about like safe choices and what we can do knowing that these systems are in effect to make a safe choice for ourselves. And sometimes that's just sitting in the room and talking about how terrible these systems are.
Mhm.
Sometimes that's the only safe choice that we have.
So
Your
important to me.
solution? Oh, look, we went really different,
Oh,
we
I
had
can
really different emotional responses to that.
You're
Uh-huh.
looking for a solution?
I'm like, yeah, so you fixed
Yeah.
this, correct, Hannah? How have you solved this
It is
problem?
solved. And that is it. And schedule your session with me today.
Individual results may vary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That though seems to be so much of what you've named here, Hannah. I don't know. I hope you all still feel this way sometimes as a way of like normalizing that I still feel this way with the clients we work with. It can feel like getting to work with so many clients over the years. It can feel at times like, oh, we need a massive skill set. We need to be able to cover all this ground with people. And what this conversation is a true affirmation of is there are some basic pillars here. And there's distress tolerance, there's change, there's acceptance, but there's a big piece of acknowledgement of doing individual work in a systemic and structural context.
Mhm.
And I think, Hannah, what you're sharing is like as real as possible, but sometimes there are places where you can work with clients on like the choice they have within those systems and structures. And there are places where it sounds like you just need to open up space for the shittiness of that reality.
Yeah. I always think of, well, pulling back to what we were talking about in the beginning. There's that metaphor that I didn't make up this time. I heard it somewhere else. Of the sunglasses and how our mood kind of can distort the information that can come through, right? Depending on what sunglasses you're wearing, what color are they, right? And working and living, existing in these systemic structures, combining that with our moods, how we receive them, in what way we're receiving them. It's just, sometimes it does feel impossible and kind of objective, right? Looking at the big system itself, but also knowing that you are human, you are a person, and you've all the things and all the lenses that are going to come with you. And that's not a character deficit. That's, again, being human. So yeah,
Wow.
I appreciate these pillars that you named, Katie. That feels really solid in the way that you say that.
This is what one of the terms that we throw around a lot in our sort of mission values is non-pathologizing. And I think that that's so much more than saying that big old purple book of diagnoses isn't the end all be all. It's really about saying so much of what people show up with, so much of the distress that people experience is the result of systems that were designed to create that. And moving from there's something wrong with me to I'm responding to something that's wrong it could feel like a language shift, but it can be so empowering to people to recognize, oh, I'm not broken. That thing's broken.
Mhm. It feels very clear. I mean, Jake and I get to know this because we get to work with you, Hannah. But this conversation also affirms that when folks start working with you, I mean, maybe they've had therapy previously, especially with what you're saying about the sunglasses. I think there's some therapists who use that as an intervention, understandably, to be like, let's get some better sunglasses. And when folks come in to work with you, you're like, it's not about fixing your sunglasses. It's about understanding that, of course, you have 10 different pairs of sunglasses. That's not a problem. This just really, I know, trust, and this really affirms that when folks get to work with you, they're probably getting to do different work than they've been able to do before. And we're so grateful for that. And this conversation has been so meaningful. Thank you so much for being open to, talk with us, but to like be you with us.
That's so warm and fuzzy. Thank y'all. That's so sweet. It's always such a pleasure. You guys are so easy, and Be Wells. Everybody who works at Be Well is just so nice. I'm like, everyone who works at Be Well, no, for real. Everyone who works at Be Well is great.
Say it into the mic a little more. That would be
Yeah.
great.
I don't mean to be cheesy real quick before we do the how do you find Hannah if you want to.
You don't mean to be.
Okay, I mean to be cheesy. What I feel so good about every day that I walk into our space is in every conversation like this that we've had, the people that are in our group come up as, and I can remember, coming out of the pandemic, some of those first things that we would all get together for. Remember in our old space, Katie and I kind of like caught each other for a moment and I went, our people are great. And then I think I had a conversation with Jackie a few weeks later where she comes to me, she goes, our people are great. And then another conversation, it just keeps coming up as like, there is this genuineness of we're all kind of different, right? There's not like one thing that you can point to and say the therapists at Be Well are X, but there's this synergy and dynamism and corporate.
Speaky, speak.
Yeah, no, there's just this way that we all have managed to exist in these really cool relationships, that our clients are incredible people. The people that are here are also really incredible people. And that's such a fun thing to be able to say about work, because I know so many of us haven't always been able to say that.
Isn't it wild that like safety can just run a thread through the whole experience in every facet, like safety and exhale and all that, like it's cool,
Trust.
we're good. All of that, it runs through every facet at Be Well. I haven't had that experience before. I don't think it's very common. I don't think a lot of people have had that, but we got it.
Thank you for being a part of that. Just thank you. This is so lovely. And this is absolutely what is inspiring these conversations. I don't think we'd feel energy behind this if we didn't feel this energy within our group. And with folks like you, Hannah, consenting and being open to show up and have a conversation that isn't just like, tell us your bio, what are your credentials, what are the presenting issues in your caseload, how do you fix people, your willingness to kind of get creative with us here. We're so appreciative. And to give people your info, we're going to have it on the little card that we always have it on after these videos, but They can find you at hannah@bewellcounselingservices.com, the longest email address ever. They can find you at our website. They can get in touch with you there. And you are currently accepting new clients and seeing people via telehealth, correct?
Correct.
Awesome. So we hope people will reach out because you were just a gift. And until next time, thanks everyone for joining, for watching and listening.
Thank you.